Hello everyone, welcome to IMPRINT IS, and I'm Varun Khuller, and we're looking at the daily news discovery for the day, 1st of December, right? And we're looking at the articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. Okay, so first of all, what all we'll be covering? We're looking at the death penalty debate, and we're going to try a question on that as well. We'll look into another article that is saying Ukraine is barring the entry of Russian men, right? And this is for people at they're trying to bar any kind of soldiers, etc., from coming in the disguise of civilians. Then the CEC and his view, the outgoing CEC and his views on fake news. We'll look at the back series. We'll try to explain it from the Hindu perspective as well, right? Fiscal deficit. We'll look into that, right? GDP and jobs and the wage track, right? So basically, mainly, if you think about it, there are at least 4 or 5 articles from yesterday's newspapers that are on Indian economy, right? So the first is obviously GS2. We look at polity, governance, and high related issues. So the beautiful, I think this is the must-read article, right? So this is a must-read article, right, from the Hindu, and here we have Justice Kurian Joseph, who's just retired. He has said something very interesting. He has talked about abolishing capital punishment. So that is one of the most interesting things that have happened, right? I think in this year's judicial jurisprudence, I would say. So what does he say? He says that though the law laid down in Bachchan Singh 1980, upholding the validity of death penalty and laying down the guidelines for awarding death in the rarest of rare case, still holds, right? He says there's some issues with this. What does he say? He says that now in our world, now we are in a modern world, right? It is impossible to ignore the ethical and practical dimensions of the debate that is increasingly questioning the wisdom of capital punishment. And Joseph basically says that, Justice Joseph, that is, underscore the arbitrary manner in which it is awarded by different judges and the way public discourse influences such decisions. So take the example of Nirbhaya case. People were out for blood. It was as if they wanted retribution. They didn't want justice. Okay. Further, there are judge-centric variations which can occur, and Supreme Court itself spoke of extremely uneven application of the norms laid down in Bachchan Singh case. And also the Law Commission, its report in 2015 said that the constitutional regulation of capital punishment attempted in that case has failed to prevent death sentences from being arbitrary and freakishly imposed. So obviously, Justice Joseph says there is no principal method to remove such arbitrariness from capital sentencing, and there's something needs to be done, right? So the problem is that what kind of whether we should have death penalty or whether we should not have death penalty, capital punishment should be there, obviously. So obviously the reason is obviously there's a public outrage these days, right? The pros, there's a need for deterrence, and the clamor for befitting punishment to render substantial justice have dominated the discourse. So this theories of punishment on whether it ought to be punitive, retributive, reformative, or restorative are less essential to the public imagination and law enforcers when crime is grave and heinous. There is a conflict of those who sense the danger of inconsistent application and those who believe in condign justice. So there is obviously there, right? So the idea is there's obviously a moral position that obviously, life is sacred. So state doesn't give life. So how can it take life? So obviously there's kind of a moral circumstances to basically removing death penalty, right? And the rarest of the rare obviously is very, very weak in application and implementation, according to this article. And the Supreme Court is also saying that post-review, reviews and curative petitions are routinely admitted. And review petitions are now heard in open court. And the treatment of death row prisoners has been humanized, and there's scope of judicial review even against sovereign decision denying clemency. That is the Presidential Pardon Article 72. If there is still a perception of arbitrariness in the way death sentences are awarded, the only long-lasting solution is the abolition, and therefore Justice Kurian and Law Commission actually right. Okay, so just to revise, what are the pros and cons, right? So what is the pros of having death penalty? It gives deterrence, right? It gives closure to the victim's family. It basically gives, because recently there are a lot of child rapists under 12 years of age, a child is being raped. So that basically tells you that some kind of a strict action needs to be taken here as well, right? So this is again necessary. The cons are obviously it's against morality itself. The state does not give life. Why? How can it take life? Right? It is only supposed to be a caretaker. Right? Then obviously there's always a chance that new evidence may come, and consider the fact that the prosecutors, the defense counsel is not that great, because only a person in India, it's expensive to obtain justice. So a person might not be able to defend himself well. So that is the other case that which can basically goes against the against death penalty. Then you will find death penalty is used majorly against the minorities in India, and that's another thing which is there. Then, the prudential pardon clemency factor is obviously very, very arbitrary again, right? As seen in the case of governor remitting the death sentence to life imprisonment and so on, right? And there was a case in Tamil Nadu as well, if you remember, a couple of weeks ago. Right. So that I would say that death penalty definitely should be done away with, as India is a progressive nation, I would say. Okay, then we have this. Ukraine has barred the entry of Russian men, right? So Ukraine has barred Russian men aged 16 to 60 from entry, as tension mounted between the two, countries over Moscow seizures of 3 Ukraine ships, right? And how this happened? The move came after Kyiv imposed martial law in border states this week, right? In response to Russian seizure of ships and sailors off Moscow and ex-Crimea, and it is obviously the most dangerous conflict, right, in years between the ex-Soviet neighbors who are locked in conflict over the Russian-backed separatist areas, right? Okay, so that is what says that male citizens of Russian Federation is restricted. So now we're going to have hard border, and that's the thing. Okay, so the idea is that it might be that some kind of mischief might be done by Russians in Ukraine, and that is the threat they might are saying, right? Okay, so that was it. Let's go ahead. The fake news affects voting behavior in a big way, and this is the outgoing CEC, right? Remember, the new CEC is Mr. Sunil Arora, sorry, right? So Mr. Sunil Arora is from Rajasthan. He's a 1980 batch IS officer, right? So the questions, this interview is very interesting. So the ECI, so obviously there are a lot of things that he's saying in this, but the most interesting one is the reforms which he's talking about. He's saying one important electoral reforms relate to money, in which if a ceiling on a political party expenditure is brought, it will improve the expenditure finance campaign. It would be more transparent and a level playing field. As is being reported in the media, only the ruling party is getting everything. As much as 90% of the funds are going towards the ruling party. And for a democracy to survive and thrive, not only a very effective ruling party is required, but an equally effective opposition party. So we must have something to regulate this, because democracy cannot be, subjugated by capitalism, and that is what is actually happening right now. Secondly, obviously, social media, right? Social media fake news affecting voting behavior in a big way. And right now, the only mechanism is Section 126 and EC instruction on paid news. The other things, so he says we have brought in a robust mechanism for conducting social media platforms, which we are working on, and we have already interacted with the organizations such as Google and WhatsApp. And EC will take a call on all those factors. As regards fake news, since the matter is subject to the Supreme Court, I won't be able to tell much. He's saying that. Okay, so then he's saying campaign finance must also be available through transparent means. The ruling party will always have an edge, because everybody, feels that the ruling party can help in some way. So that kind of actually says, and the Supreme Court of US has also already said that corporates express themselves through political donations, right? And it is covered under the Article 19, and in their case, the fundamental right of freedom of expression. That in our case is Article 19, right? It could also be from personal reasons if they subscribe to the same philosophy and thinking. So that's another thing. So what in this article he has mainly talked about is that the major challenges are social media, money, and other factors. But they feel that yes, the election commission is worthy and can do most of it, right? Can take care of it. But on the same way, there's a lot of controversies regarding the use of EVMs and VVPAT and the one-way electronic systems, right? So there's something, I think, there's some kind of review is definitely required in the EVMs, and that's going to happen. I think the VVPAT should be made mandatory, and that would be my opinion on the fake news, right? Okay, let's go ahead. Now let's look at GS3, and that is Indian economy, and let's look at TCS Sharad Raghavan. He's written an article on the GDP estimates which have been released. So he says the government on Wednesday released the GDP growth estimates for the previous years based on the new methods of calculation and base year it adopted in 2015, right? And the data and the manner in which was, basically led to a lot of criticism from the opposition political parties and economists alike. Okay, so let's talk about it now. What happened? So in 2015, the government adopted a new method for calculation of gross domestic product of the country, and also adopted the gross value added measure to better estimate economic activity. Right. Further, the change involved bringing towards the base year used to calculation 2011 from 11/12 to 2014. So this is important. This is objective type question which can continue. Right. However, this has led to the problem of not being able to compare recent data with the years preceding 2011, because obviously there is no back series data. Now, what has happened is on Wednesday, right, a back series data was there, right? So the new data release shows that GDP growth during the UPA years averaged 6.7 during both UPA 1 and 2, compared with 8.1 and 7.76 using the older method. Okay, so that's what happening is when you use new method, the old, especially if the government has changed, the old growth rate would tend to decrease. Right. So the current government witnessed an average GDP growth rate of 7.35% during the first year based on new method. I would really like to say that this new method is not that great. Okay. Now the new data, contrary, right, to the earlier perception that Indian economy never grew to a high growth rate of more than 9%, because if you look at the old numbers, at least in 2 years it basically had gone more than 10%. What the chief statistician TCA Anand says, that the new data, especially for mining and manufacturing sectors, shows that India did not recover from the global financial crisis as quickly as initially thought, right? Because obviously the mining industry and the manufacturing industry really got hit by the global financial crisis. So the next question comes as what kind of changes were made, because when the previous data says something else, now you're saying something different. So the first and basic was the calculation was the base year, right? 2011 year, right, is a simpler for calculation of subsequent years, right? But understand, what Sharad Raghavan is not talking about. 2011-12 was the year of the Eurozone crisis. So using such a year for as a base year is actually bordering on stupidity, but okay. Anyhow, so according to Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, the method for preparing the back series is largely the same as was being used to calculate data in a new base, right? Now this is obviously, remember, largely the same. There's a very famous quote, lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? That I think that is what should be the reply to this kind of exercise, but which has been done just before the elections, right? So that the government can maybe say something, right, for them. Okay. Because they have actually mismanaged the Indian economy big time in the last 4 years. Okay, so while doing the exercise, what the government basically did was they adopted the recommendations of the United Nations Systems of National Accounts, which included measuring the GVA, the net value added, and the new use of newer data sources whenever they were. And the most interesting is the MCA21 database, which they have been using. Obviously, the problem is that there's nothing but as a MCA database. So what they did was they basically took some kind of yardsticks, right? And actually, that is the major reason that this is happening, right? On the right, so the old method measured two volumes: actual physical output in manufacturing, crop production, and employment for services. The MCA database allows for a more granular approach, looking at balance sheet data of each company and aggregating the performance of the sector from that after adjusting for inflation. Now they're trusting the balance sheets of Indian companies. Wonderful, right? I would give them some kind of credit for doing that. But okay, let's what else can they do? This is the best, I think, right? So then the question comes, what is the data? Now the problem is there are a number of ways to calculate the back series data. How they actually arrive as the best one is a big doubt, because previously in June there was another data which was released, right, by the Center Statistics, the draft one. Right, it showed that the UPA year, so the draft report actually showed that the UPA 2 crossed 9% on 4 occasions and even hit 10.78 in 2010. Now, obviously, the gimmick, jugglery, and chicanery which is done by this government, can only be justified by one thing. Like, remember, Niti Aayog, right, is the one releasing for the first time ever. Niti Aayog is coming in, and see, remember, Niti Aayog is not a government organization, is an extra constitutional body created by Mr. Modi, right? And if he loses, I don't think so it will survive next year, right? Because that's one of the biggest, because it has just taken away power from the erstwhile planning commission and given it to the ministries. That's what has happened. Okay, so this was about the batch series data, right? I think what you should be taking it is most important is how it had changed, right? So initially we have taken the GVA method, so this can actually come in your prelims question. The MCA 21 database on the objective type question come on that also, that it is released by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So that is the two kind of questions which I like to ask from this. I think the politics is something that will not ever be asked, except maybe in an interview. Okay, physical deficit exceeds full year target in just 7 months, and this was bound to happen with this government, and this has been happening regularly for this. And then disinvestment targets increase, and they force one profitable company like ONGC to buy HPCL. And this happened the last year as well. So it says the net tax receipts were 6.61 lakhs, which is only 44% of the budget estimates for the year, with just 5 months to go. All right, at 8.08 crore, only 44% of the budget amount was there, right? On the other hand, expenditure stood at 14.5 lakhs. So we are having at a high physical rate. So this, what it says is that India Ratings, this is actually a firm, right? So they say that the physical deficit is expected to be 3.5% of GDP, higher than the government target of 3.3. Right, but the government has repeatedly expressed its commitment to meet the target, so they will do some kind of jewelry, I would say, at the end of the year. The growth rate of the 8 infrastructure, it's saying, right, IIP has gone down to 4.8% in October due to contraction in production of oil, natural gas, and fertilizers. Please, you should know the 8 infrastructure sectors. Crude oil, natural gas, and fertilizers are 3 of them. The rest of them are coal, crude oil, natural gas, right, refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement, and electricity. Now, this is always asked in prelims, right? Twice it does come in different years, and for electricity is the biggest constituent of this, right? So you should know all this. And this is something you can be asked very easily. Okay, now the next is this days. So if GDP is rising, where is the job? That is what they're saying now. What they're saying, if the GDP growth in the last 4 years is better than UPA years, then why is investment down by 5 to 6%? Why are not our exports crossing the 315 billion mark hit in March 2014? Why is the credit growth sluggish, right? Credit growth to industry is nearly 1.4%. Why no jobs are there? Why so much farm distress and maximum number of farmers suicides have taken up in the last 4 years? Now, what has happened is this government has even stopped collecting data, right? NRCB doesn't actually release how many farmers suicides are happening. Okay, so that is what the Congress leaders are talking about, right? But okay, all this is fine. Okay, now the problem is very simple. I think this job problem is going to be a big issue in the next couple of years. Let's see what happens. Okay, growth shows 7.1% on oil and rupee. GDP expansion eases from 8.2 in Q1. So this is, again, I think you should get to know. Keep in this, just note this number. That is all that is required. Okay, all right. Manufacturing growth rate was at 7.4, agriculture at 3.8, construction and sector, everything they mentioned, right? So they're saying that, okay, it's fine that this is at this much amount of growth rate. And I think they will say that in the future it will go high. So just note down these numbers. That's all that is required, right? And mining is minus 2.4, but it just reflects the monsoon month deceleration. This will again come up. So the idea would be that the expectation would be 7.2 to 7.9 for the whole year. Okay, and that's the plan for this. Okay, then we have this wage drag report. The International Labour Organization Global Wage Report has drawn sharp, focus on the biggest drags on global economic momentum. It's saying that there's a slowing wage growth. It's saying that the global wage growth adjusted for inflation is 1.8% from 2.8% in 2006. It is worrying because it is the lowest growth wage growth rate excluding China in the world, and this can actually create a huge problem because now no longer the growth rate can be held to be consumption oriented. So the obvious impact of this low pace has been the global economic growth, with consumption patterns demand hurt from spending from wage earners. So this is a big problem, right? uh, so now this slow growth wage growth prompted US Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to observe in June that in a world where we are hearing lots and lots about labor shortages everywhere we go, now we hear about labor shortages, but where is the wage reaction? There is a bit of a puzzle that despite the fact there is labor shortage, there is no kind of a increase in wages. So it's somehow, the capitalist economy is becoming more and more automated. Okay, the ILO observes that the acceleration of economic growth in high income countries was led mainly by higher investment spending rather than by private consumption, right? And extending the time horizon, it reveals that the real wages almost tripled in developing and emerging economies of the G20 between 1999 and 2017. But in the same, while advanced economies, the increase in the same period aggregated to just follow 9%. And in many low income and middle income economy, the average wage absolute sum was so low that it was still inadequate to cover bare needs of the workers. Right. So obviously there is globalization accompanied by a worldwide decline in bargaining power of the workers. This has resulted in decoupling between laborers, and so this is the reason they have given. So the reason is there is a decline in the bargaining power of the workers, right, in the wake of globalization because of a lot of competition, right, and there's a decoupling between wages and labor productivity. And the fallout has been the weakening of the share of labor composition in GDP across the countries from the early 90s. Right, so Washington Economy-Based Policy Institute uses the U.S. example to buttress the argument that widening inequality is slowing growth and demand by shifting large shares of income to rich households rather than save and than spend. Okay, and for India policymakers, it's the same, right? To reap the economic dividend, we not only need jobs but wage expansion that is robust and equal. And I think this is a good quote, and this is something you can use in an essay, and maybe it can even come in an answer. Okay, I think this is the same article. We just need this data, right, for you that what has happened in from July to September 2018 to 19. Manufacturing, mining and quarrying is in minus. Agriculture is going high. That's good, right? Manufacturing growing at the same level. Electricity production increasing. Construction has gone up. That's good, right? But trade, hotel sector has gone down. So that's again a problem, right? Financial services, etc. The same. Public administration and defense is going up. That's pretty good, right? So our GVA at GD price and it's mentioned, which is better, and we feel that this will be a sizable jump because last year it was 6.3, so this year 7.1. This would increase our growth rate this year. So that is the idea. Okay, so in the imprint answer writing challenge for the day is the time has come for review death penalty, its purpose, practice, discuss the pros and cons of retaining death penalty in India, right? And thank you. Join the Telegram group for the PDF of this lecture, right? And do like, comment, and share. If you want any detailed coverage of any other topic, please do comment on this video. Thank you so much.